Hey y'all, welcome back. This is Sharon, and I think this may be my most important video yet. So we're going to be discussing covering and the doctrine of covering, and I really want to call it the heretical doctrine of covering. And I don't say that lightly. Trust me, I don't say that lightly. But I'm coming with receipts. I'm coming with receipts on how this is heretical. Biblical receipts, proof receipts, receipts. And we're going to talk about it today. So I feel like in order for me to really get into this before we break down the definition of covering, where it came from, all those things, the first thing I need to do is give you a little bit of background and how the Lord brought me here and why he has me covering this and confronting this today. But oh, wait, I just got to tell you though, the devil really don't want you to know this. Okay. He does not want you to know this. I believe those that are watching this, you've been affected by the demonic doctrine, the demonic teaching of covering. And I believe it's going to set you free, because the way I won't even call it warfare, but getting ready to tape this video. I've been trying to tape this video for about 3 hours, okay, straight. And the first thing that happened was a random stray dog came up and started barking right outside the door for it had to be 45 minutes. And it was nonstop. It was like, whoo, 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 whoo. I was like, oh my God, he ain't even taking a breath. This is giving demon. Then then after that, and I'm really not trying to read into stuff, but it was really crazy. At first I was like, oh, it's a random dog, please stop barking. And then it just went on and on and on and on and on. And then another dog came and joined. So it was 2 dogs barking. And I was just like, what is happening right outside the door? And then after that, a random car alarm starts going off nonstop. That goes on for some time. I had to wait on that. Then all of a sudden it just started pouring down, raining. Then an insect attacked me while I was trying to take. I was like, it's giving petty warfare, not even just regular warfare. It's giving petty war. You really petty right now. But no, for real, I want to be serious, because this is a really, really important topic, that we got to break down. Okay. So I want to start by giving some background on who I am. As I said, I'm Sharon. My background is really unique because I grew up, or I started out as Baptist. My family is Baptist. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, by way of Atlanta, then moved to New York. So I've lived in a few different places, more than a few different places now. And my mother struck out on her own to go into non-denomination space when I was still very just born nearly, right? Left the Baptist church. I have experience in the Baptist church because my family is still Baptist. And so I've gone back and forth. I've seen both. And I feel like my mom made a good decision when she deviated and started going into this non-denomination space for multiple reasons. And one thing about it is that the Lord really protected me, because at this time when she made this decision, I can remember the Word of Faith movement was starting to rise, right? And it didn't really affect me initially because I wasn't saved, right? I wasn't saved. I was still young. I was basically a baby. And then as I got older, my relationship with God developed on its own. I had an encounter with the Lord at my house on my 12th birthday. And the Lord told me he was calling me. I heard a voice literally call my name in my living room. And I was like, what? My mom's at work. Who is calling my name? And that was how I found out that I was called. He said, I'm calling you and you're an adult in my eyes starting today. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Your girl's an adult? Wait a minute. Let me get myself together. And I had an understanding of my sin, a deep understanding of my sin. And so I began to, I was night and day. I went from making F's You know what I mean? Fighting at school, you know, to making B's and C's, which was a lot for your girl because I was making F's, right? To not fighting at all, to, you know, being low key kind of like evil in some ways, like struggling with dark. I always had like a light darkness struggle when I was young. But I at that time struggled more on a darker side. And then when I said yes to the Lord, or he said, I'm calling you, turn from what you're doing, I just ran into the light. And it was like night and day, and everybody saw it. The day before my birthday, I was one way, and on my birthday and after, I was another way. And it was very clear that something had happened. So my mom bought me a teen study Bible. She was so happy for me to be saved. And I started to read it. It was me and Jesus at that point. And so the prosperity gospel that's coming up in Word of Faith, it's not really affecting me that much because my walk was my own with God, and he had protected me, and anything he would impress upon me, lead me to, and like studying in my word was that was what I let lead me. However, it did affect me. And I saw it, right? And I can't say that it didn't have some level of impact, but it's like I had an early understanding that something was off. And I can remember that by the time I get to college, I start to waver in my faith. Honestly, before I even get to college, I start backsliding. I had always had a relationship with the Lord since I had given my life, but I just struggled, as you do when you get to high school and you get to college and you're trying to like keep your faith, but at the same time, you want to be cool, you want to hang out, you want to go to the club, you want to do all the things, right? And I wanted to do all the things, right? And so that's what I did. I still did those things, but then I would come home and read my Bible. So I was vacillating. I was very much on the fence, or very much like, okay, I'm gonna live my life. I'm young and I'll come back later. Right. Which was, by the way, it's a terrible idea. I'll talk about that another time. That's a terrible idea. You just don't do it. But I ended up doing that. And what ended up happening is the Lord begins to instruct me, and I can remember I started getting like prophetic words as really from childhood. But once I started hitting my teenage years, I started to get what I didn't even know they were prophetic words back then, because the prophetic at that time wasn't like a thing. And if somebody gave a word of knowledge or spoke something prophetically, they didn't even call it that. As far as what my experience was in the non-denomination space, I can't speak for other spaces because I had not yet had any exposure to spirit-filled, what they would call spirit-filled spaces, or charismatic Pentecostal, whatever. I had not had any exposure to that at that point. So when people would say things to me, I would be like, somebody said this, and I don't know how they knew that. But that was happening a lot. It was starting to happen a lot. And people would see this large calling on my life and all this ministry on my life. And it ended up being something that scared me. It deeply scared me because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't get on the bus. I couldn't get on the train. I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't do anything without somebody seeing this thing on me. And it felt so big. I just wanted to, what me and an old friend used to always say, put my Nike shoes on and run the other way. Like, that's how scary it was. And so what ended up happening was, I can remember feeling so much fear about it, and the Lord telling me, get on YouTube. I want you to get on YouTube, and I want you to start telling people about me. And when he first started saying this, there was not ministry happening on YouTube. Like, that wasn't a thing at that point. And he was like, I want you to tell people about me. Just get on, just start. And I was like, well, God, like I'm doing my own thing. I'm with you, but I'm also like doing my own thing. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around why he would ask me to do this. I didn't feel qualified, and I was afraid of the call. I was afraid because I knew that I was going to have a cost to pay, that I was going to have to pay the cost. Like, I didn't understand exactly what that looked like, but I knew I was going to have to pay something to start to go down this road. And I just didn't feel like I was ready. There was a lot of fear wrapped up there. So my first problem was that I had fear. But then As I got a little bit older, I can remember the Lord redirected my path and sent me to New York. And he said, I'm calling you to somewhere new. I want you to go to New York, and your ministry is going to start there. And your career is going to bud there. And so I said, all right. So I moved to New York after I graduated from design school. And when I got to New York, the first thing the Lord told me was, I want you to start exploring churches that are Pentecostal, charismatic, apostolic, like the churches that believe in the gifts. Because what I was experiencing and what was interesting about my life is that God had always directed and guided me. I didn't know what to call that. That wasn't necessarily anything somebody taught me. That was my very first encounter with God, was extremely supernatural, and I changed overnight. And he led me that way going forward. And so I didn't have a way to explain that. And honestly, I didn't even know there were churches that existed that believed in that. I just remember I got to New York and he was like, I want you to start going to these churches. I'm going to teach you more about this and teach you about the gifts of God and teach you about the gifts I've endowed you with. And when you get there, don't take everything in and don't convert. It was a really clear impression. Don't convert to to those denominations. You're just going to learn. So I always saw it as like, this is interesting. There's this impression that it's like temporary, like it's like a temporary space. But then it was weird because then I got there and I started to go to these churches, and sure enough, I'm learning, I'm seeing things that I've had happen in my life, all my life. And they're reconfirming that. They're even seeing that on my life. They're even calling out the ministry that's on my life. And they can see they're reconfirming all the prophetic words I had received on the streets and the buses and the trains and the this and that. They were confirming those things and reiterating those things. In my prophetic words I've been hearing all my life have almost been word for word identical by different people that don't know each other. And so that was really, really unique. But the problem was I couldn't really find rest. I felt like I couldn't find rest because then he would make it clear to me that you're going to learn some things, but there are going to be some things that are extra biblical. That was one of the first things he said to me. It's going to be, he didn't use the phrase extra biblical. I didn't have that terminology at that point, but it was like, there are going to be some things you're going to learn that are not in my Bible. And I don't want you to latch on to those things. I want you to learn them so you can learn what not to do, what not to believe. But I don't want you to buy into it. I want you to spit out the bones and pick up the things that you need for your walk. So I did exactly what I felt the Lord was telling me to do. But the problem was that I couldn't find rest there. I wanted to join a church. I'd always been a part of a church my whole life. I've been in church. I have had the same church home back home in St. Louis. And who, where the pastor is that I still love. I always had a church home in Atlanta, Georgia, non-denominational churches, always, all my life. And so I get to New York and I can't find a place of rest. I'm at these churches that are charismatic, whatever, or Pentecostal or whatever. And I'm not seeing, I can't rest because there was always something wrong theologically that I couldn't align to. And I felt a temporariness, like I couldn't stay. But then I also couldn't find rest by going back to what I knew, because I also saw some things theologically wrong at the places that I knew, because they might not have believed at that level. They didn't practice the gifts. If somebody comes into the church and they manifest right then and there, they manifest some spiritual activity, they wouldn't know what to do. They would not know what to do, or they don't believe tongues are for today, or they whatever. Right. And these are things that I knew the Lord was teaching me about. And so it was like, I couldn't go back to some level of spiritual blindness either. So it was like, God, where is my rest? Like, where, of course our rest is in Jesus Christ, right? But where's my tribe? Where's my church? Where's my community? Where's my people? And that was something I wrestled with, because I couldn't find this place, right? And I never did get I didn't get like an answer from the Lord. I would pray about it constantly. The Lord would answer all kind of things, but when it came to that, he just didn't say anything, and I couldn't figure out why. And the reason that it bothered me so much was because I then began to run into the covering theology. So here I am, I'm at these churches, they see me, and I might park somewhere for a while or whatever, but it was like I never would get the yes to join. And I would feel the pressure from them. Sometimes it would be like even a prophetic word. The Lord says, this is your home, join today. Which I feel like is manipulation, different story. But that would happen, or it would be like, this is, you need a covering. I see ministry all over you. I see this is your walk. I see this massive calling on your life. I see this huge ministry. I see you called to this, whatever, right? But the thing was, when they would see that, it also would cause this other shift to happen where it would be like, who are you under? What's your church home? Where do you come from? Who's your pastor? I need to trace your lineage. Because see, I need to know where you're coming from. And if you're not underneath somebody, you need to come get under me, or you don't operate and do nothing, because if you try to do some ministry, you are doing it illegally. And it was pressure. I'm talking about big pressure. And at this point, I want to be obedient to God. I'm starting to slay at least get away for somewhat, overcome the fear that I was dealing with. And I was starting to walk more of a straight line and be more serious about my walk with Christ. And that calling that God had given me to start and launch out was getting louder and louder and louder. And the Lord is like, I need you to get online. I need you to do ministry online. It's time. Now is the season. But then every time that voice from the Lord would say that, I would get intense pressure from somebody around me telling me it would be illegal. Don't you dare even think about launching out without being underneath a covering. It's dangerous. It's this, it's that. And I'm going to get into all that. And so what ends up happening is it causes me not to do anything. I become stagnant. I'm talking about out of the fear of what I was hearing, even though it never, ever, ever resonated as true. I need to say that it never resonated as true. I knew that what I was hearing, I couldn't find biblical evidence for. And you're talking about somebody that I got saved at 12 and I was reading my word like you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was reading my word. I had a voracious appetite for the word at that point. So I knew the word at a really young age, and I couldn't find evidence for this. So when I would hear things that were not quite biblical, I would always be like, that ain't right. I've never read that before. Where'd you get that? You know what I mean? I just would know. But it was so strong, and the pressure around it and the teaching and the constant reinforcement of it in sermons and mentoring and discipling and being whatever was constant. And it was enough for me to stop and say, nah, I'm going to chill. I'm going to wait, God. I'm going to wait on you to give me this, mythical spiritual mother and father, or I'm going to wait on you to send it. Right. And I'm not saying you can't have a spiritual mother or father. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that there is, that there could be good in God sending that, but I don't believe that it is law. And so in my case, it took me some years to figure out what the Lord was doing with me, but there was a reason he wasn't letting me join, which I honestly feel like is another topic for another day. I don't want to throw us off, but I at the time, I thought it was something wrong with me. and that they'll call you a church hopper, and you get called all kind of names, when you gonna lay down, when you gonna settle somewhere and just stay there, and it's like, there's another side to this, because in a lot of these churches that I had seen, can we talk about the fact that I was seeing spiritual abuse? I was seeing pastors that were sleeping with people in the congregations, pastors that were trying to sleep with me. I was seeing people stealing money. I was seeing so much molestation happening in the church, or coming out that it happened. Witchcraft, warlocks. Witches who were operating as pastors, but were actually witches or warlocks, doing divination from the platform or behind the scenes or whatever. Like, I was seeing so much stuff. And so what would happen is, like, I would be ready to like join a church and make it my church home, and then something would come out about that church. You know what I mean? Everything from the church was largely participating in all kinds of sexual sin or perversion. It was like every time I would get close, or certain leaders in the church were practicing witchcraft, or the pastor, preacher themselves were operating in divination, calling it prophecy. Like, all kinds of stuff will come out, and then the Lord will be like, don't join, because I've just revealed to you what's happening here. And so I couldn't stay at a place like that and also be practicing wisdom. And that happened over and over and over and over. Yet these churches get up in their pulpits, and I'm not saying everybody, but like a lot of folks get up in the pulpit and they talk about people hopping around, moving around, you not joining here, you needed this and you need a covering and all this stuff, but not taking accountability for the spiritual abuses that are happening in church. I mean, the lack of accountability and silence around that is just insanity to me. But you will hear over and over and over and over until it is beats into your head that you need to submit yourself under leadership. And a lot of this leadership is abusive. A lot of this leadership is immature. A lot of this leadership are practicing things that are perverted, and you should not attach yourself to it. You shouldn't join it, and God knows you shouldn't call it a covering. You know what I mean? And so, but nobody's talking about that. And there's something to really be said about that. And so, every time I would get ready to join, you know what I mean? Things would come out. And I was like, God, what is this? I'm trying to figure out what this means, what it is you're trying to show me, what it is you're trying to teach me. I know now, but at that time, I was pretty darn confused about what I was experiencing and witnessing and why. And so what ended up happening, fast forward, is that I allowed, which is one of my biggest regrets, I allowed this covering teaching, and out of fear, not out of me believing it, but more so out of fear of what people would think about me, what people would say about me, what people would have to say about me being a woman and preaching, what people would have to say about me being out here following what the Lord told me to do, even though I might not be, planted somewhere at that moment. Like, it was constantly haunting me, and caused me to never, ever strike out and be obedient to the biggest command the Lord had given me, which is start ministry, go preach on the streets, go preach online. And back when he was saying this to me, I had a really strong influence online that was building, and I didn't use it. I just got offline once the Lord began to consecrate me. And I don't want to say I missed my time, because that's not what happened. But there was a window that I should have been striking out in, and I didn't do it because of fear of man and what they would have to say about me. And what the Lord began to impress upon me as he began to show me that this doctrine was wrong, heretical, and demonic, was that it wasn't just me, but that there were thousands of people that he had called in a ripe time, and a ripe season, that were stuck on pews, that were stuck behind leadership that would not allow them to do what God had called them to do out of sake of obedience and honor to them, or in support of their ministries. They're not allowed to move because you're here to support me. You're here to support the man or woman of God. And that is your job. That's what you were put here to do. And you can do a little bit of ministry at your job, your day to day. You can do a little bit of ministry when you go to the grocery store or something. But don't you dare think about doing ministry at a larger scale than that, because your job is to be here to support me and my church. And the Lord began to just really show me that there were so many people that he was calling to go and preach the gospel, because souls are perishing all around us. And so many churches are concerning themselves with the building, concerning themselves with filling seats, concerning themselves with getting more members, and not concerning themselves with preaching the gospel to the lost. And God is looking for people that are going to get out there and do that, that are going to go and win people, that are going to bring revival to people. And what's happening is that those people that are called are just sitting. They're just sitting. I literally could see them just sitting and watching their life pass them by for numerous reasons, but especially because that covering teaching had them bound. And so the Lord asked me to release this teaching to help people be set free from that. So fast forward, this year I had a hellish year, a straight up hellish year. I ended up taking a very high position on a high profile job. And when I did that, before I did that, actually, the Lord let me know that warfare was going to break out against me as soon as I said yes, but that he was calling me to do it and to trust him. And so I did the job. And upon receiving the job, 2 days later, I ended up having an apartment fire and losing everything to soot and smoke. Okay. And then after that, 3 weeks later, I had a car accident and was hit by a tractor trailer's tire that almost killed me. Like by a half an inch, I lived. Thank God. And I want to give that testimony in a separate video of like what really happened with that. But after that happened, I began to have people begin to come forward very, very boldly and tell me that the reason, in the midst of me going through like the hardest time of my life, instead of console me, instead of be there for me, instead of, you know what I mean, the things that you should do when somebody goes through something like that, I began to hear the reason you went through that, the reason you're going through that is because you don't have no covering. The reason this happened to you, this is witchcraft, and this is a result, and this happening to you is a result of you not having a covering. And it was so many people saying it that I was like, I looked at God, and somebody even said it was your disobedience and not submitting to a covering that put you here. And I remember going to God and being like, I know you so well. I listen to your voice. I constantly say, is this the place? Should I join here? Because I'm not a person that doesn't like authority. Like, I lean into leadership. I love mentorship. I love having somebody I can call and they guide me. So knowing that this is my personality and I seek that, yet it has been the Lord that has said, no, not yet. This is not the place. No, I'm just having you here to learn. No, no, no. I went to the Lord and I said, why is this happening? And then why is it happening where it's like they have such, it almost was like it caused a ugly character to come out of the person right when that topic comes up. Just when that topic comes up, a ugly side of a person comes out that I don't recognize, and they attack me in this specific area. And I started to put two and two together later on in this experience, because I kept noticing as I look back at the words that God had given me, prophetic words over the years, and I noticed that I had never noticed something. I noticed it, but I didn't make the connection. I constantly would get prophetic words over and over and over and over that I was dealing with charismatic witchcraft where people were trying to muzzle me, and that God was saying to speak, go forth, go, pursue, overtake, preach my word, go do it. I'm calling you to be a battle axe, all the things, right? He's saying to me, go do. I'm calling you to do this. But then somebody would come and muzzle me. Never failed. And I didn't put two and two together that muzzling, I used to think when I would hear that word, that was about maybe demonic forces. I would just think it was like the enemy. I always linked it to distractions or my fears or whatever. I never linked it to people and what they were saying to keep me quiet. My God. Never, ever linked the two, y'all. Never linked the two. And so I was like, it wasn't until after all of this took place and I'm looking back, I'm like, the muzzling was the leaders. It was the leaders. And as a result, I can remember, y'all, one year being at a conference and a woman of God was preaching, and I was all the way in the back worshiping the Lord. And I remember she came up to me and I had this shirt on that said people person. And she said, that shirt is accurate. The Lord said he's called you to be a people person, and he told you to get online and preach years ago, and you haven't done it yet. And he put a word in your belly to get out there and preach now. And there is a generation of people that need to hear the word in your belly. What are you waiting for? Be obedient to him. Go. And I remember being like, I was just crying. I knew it was true. It was almost immediate soon after that I was muzzled. But I remember I pressed forward. That was like one of the final words I'd gotten around it. And I slowly pressed forward, but I didn't have urgency at that point. I'd gotten older. The fire that I had kept getting poured, kept getting quenched, or kept getting put out, from just church culture I was constantly experiencing. But I knew what God had put inside of me was more radical than that, though it should be the norm. I wasn't doing those things. And as a result, it ended up it didn't die, but it just got dormant. And it became, a can these dry bones live situation for a long time, being in a dry place. Right? I just want to know, is anybody else feeling me? Has anybody else gone through this? Because this thing was so real. And so then when the hell year came, which was 2024, and I started going through all this stuff, the Lord reassured me, like, no, the reason you're going through this is because I'm going to use it as a testimony. Yes, for sure. It was witchcraft. I had already knew that I was experiencing deep witchcraft, because the back-to-back losses that I was experiencing were not normal. However, it wasn't because I wasn't under a covering. God is a covering. However, it was because it was going to be for his glory. He was going to use it. My story is my message. It's always been that way. My ministry is in my message. It's always been that way. God writes my story like it's a movie. And so people that don't understand that. So anyway, that's why it's really important to understand and know God for yourself. Okay. Okay. So now, I want to end off this part of my message with this. And it was the fact that I remember one of the final words that I got around this year, that I had this particular year, 2024, that I had gone through, and the fact that I had been disobedient to the Lord by not launching out and doing ministry when he asked me to do it. And I was extremely late with actually getting off the ground and starting out of fear of man. That even then I was told that me being in that situation was even a result of me not being under a covering, and got, I don't want to even call it rebuked, because when I think of rebuke, I think of something that rightly aligns with the Lord. The pastor called themselves rebuking me, the person goes by apostle, which I'm not bothered by the title apostle. I know some people are bothered by that title. I believe it just means somebody that is sent. But that person said that to me, but I knew at that point it wasn't God. And that was the beginning of a shift for me. That was the beginning, and the Lord began to really teach me. And it was funny because after that was said to me, the Lord said back to me, after that person said what they said to me, I laughed. I literally laughed, because one thing, if you know me, you cannot box me in. It don't matter. I'm like a free bird. It's impossible to put me in a cage. It's just not going to happen. God didn't make me that way. It's not because I'm wild and, God didn't make me that way. He made me free. And so it's like, the more you try to box me in, the more it's really not going to work. So I was just like, I laughed at it. I was like, okay. I didn't even take it offensively or get angry. I just was like, that's crazy what you're saying. And after that ended up happening, the Lord said to me, I want you to cover the topic of covering. And I want you to start with this. It was born out of a cult. It was born out of a cult. And I was like, what? Yeah, he said covering theology isn't even old. It's new. It's a new teaching. And that blew my mind, y'all. I had to go see if what I was hearing in my spirit was accurate. And it was. So that's what we're getting ready to talk about. We're getting ready to talk about how covering was born out of a cult. I'm going to put that on the second episode, because I feel like this has already gone on a little bit long. And I want you to get a fresh episode around it. So stay tuned. Let's jump into the next episode 2 on covering, and I will uncover how this is a heretical doctrine. Bet. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.